The storm had just begun when Officer Amenda spotted glowing eyes on the roadside. She stepped closer, and froze. A massive, bleeding bobcat stared back at her, belly swollen, eyes begging. And instead of running, she collapsed at Amenda's feet. This was no wild attack. It was a silent plea. It was nearly midnight when Officer Amenda Clark first saw the eyes. She had just turned her cruiser onto the narrow gravel road that wound along the edge of ridgepine woods. The night was quiet, too quiet. The usual forest sounds were missing. No crickets. No owl hoots. Just the faint hum of her engine and the low growl of thunder rolling in from the mountains. Amenda had done this route hundreds of times before. Same road. Same trees. Same air that smelled like wet pine and old bark. But something tonight felt off. She slowed her SUV to a crawl. Her spotlight scanned the tree line. Then she saw it. Two amber eyes. They glowed back at her from the roadside, just beyond a broken piece of fencing. Low to the ground. Unmoving. At first, she thought it was a deer. Maybe an injured coyote. But as she stepped out of her vehicle and took a cautious step forward, she saw the shape more clearly. It was a bobcat. And not just any bobcat. She was huge, her belly low and heavy. Her fur was ruffled and dirty, and her back legs were trembling. Blood stained her inner thighs. She looked straight at Amenda and didn't move. No hiss. No growl. Just silence. Amenda froze in place. She had no tranquilizer gun. No wildlife training. Her radio barely worked in this part of the forest. And yet, the animal didn't run. It was like she was waiting. The bobcat's golden eyes locked onto hers, and Amenda felt something strange. This wasn't a wild animal acting on instinct. This was a mother. A desperate, scared, injured mother. And somehow, she had come out of the woods, to her. Amenda knelt down slowly, never breaking eye contact. Her hand hovered near her belt, just in case. But the bobcat didn't charge. Didn't twitch. She simply let out a sound so low and shaky it was barely more than a breath. A whimper. Amenda felt her heart squeeze. "You're hurt," she whispered. "And you're having babies, aren't you?" The bobcat blinked once. Then, trembled and slumped onto her side. That's when Amenda noticed the contractions. She cursed under her breath and looked back at her cruiser. No animal control for miles. The nearest vet clinic was a 45-minute drive. There was no time to wait. If she didn't act now, both the mother and her unborn cubs could die right here on the gravel. She made a decision. "I'm going to help you," Amenda whispered. She rushed to the back of her SUV and pulled out the thick emergency blanket she always carried. Her hands were shaking now. Not from fear, but urgency. Returning to the bobcat, she approached slowly, laying the blanket near her. "I'm not going to hurt you," she said softly. "Just hold on." The bobcat lifted her head weakly and let it fall again. Amenda carefully slid the blanket beneath her, inch by inch, until the animal's body was resting on the soft cloth. She winced as she saw the dried blood on her paws and the tiny cuts on her belly, likely from thorns or rocks. With one deep breath, Amenda gathered the corners of the blanket and lifted. The bobcat didn't resist. She didn't make a sound. It was like she knew. Amenda placed her in the back of the cruiser and slammed the doors shut. She jumped into the front seat and turned on the sirens. Thunder cracked overhead as rain began to fall in hard, cold sheets. The road turned slick. The tires spun on the gravel before catching grip. Amenda kept glancing in the rearview mirror. The Bobcat was breathing heavily. Her eyes were closed now, her sides rising and falling in short, uneven movements. "Just hang in there," Amenda said aloud. "Just a little longer." Her hands gripped the wheel tighter as she hit the main road and gunned the gas. The vet clinic in town, Dr. Renee's Animal Emergency, was the only place open this late. Amenda had no idea if they could even handle a wild bobcat, especially one in labor, but it was the only shot they had. As the wipers battled the rain, Amenda thought about what had just happened. A wild animal, one of the most reclusive in the region, had not only come out of hiding, but had approached her. Had not attacked, had not fled. She had asked for help. Amenda didn't believe in magic. But tonight, as the storm roared above and lightning flashed across the black sky, she started to wonder. Some things couldn't be explained. And this night was far from over. The tires screeched as Officer Amenda pulled into the gravel lot outside Dr. Renee's Animal Emergency Clinic. Rain hammered the windshield, and lightning lit up the clinic's entrance like a flashbulb. She jumped out, soaked in seconds, and threw open the back of her cruiser. The Bobcat wasn't moving. "Please," Amenda whispered, her voice cracking. "Not now. Stay with me." She grabbed the blanket and dragged it toward the door. The animal was heavy, and Amenda's shoulder screamed in protest. But she didn't stop. She kicked the door with her boot until it burst open. A woman in scrubs came running, short, silver-haired, wide-eyed. "Officer Clark," she shouted over the storm. "What the?" "She's pregnant. Bleeding." "I didn't know what else to do," Amenda panted. "Please, help her." Dr. Renee didn't ask more. "Bring her to the surgery room. Hurry." They laid the Bobcat down on a stainless steel table. The vet flicked on a bright light and quickly examined the wounds. A younger vet assistant prepped the tools, while Amenda stood nearby, fists clenched, watching every move. "She's been in labor for a while," Dr. Renee muttered, eyes darting. "But her back leg's torn. Looks like she dragged herself through rough ground. Probably running from something. Or crawling towards something," Amenda said quietly. The vet glanced at her. "You mean you?" Amenda nodded. "She didn't just appear. She came to me. Like she wanted help." That thought echoed in her mind as the vet got to work, checking the heart rate, starting fluids, administering mild sedatives to ease the pain. The Bobcat's body trembled on the table. Minutes passed like hours. Amenda stayed by the door, soaked clothes clinging to her skin, adrenaline still running high. She watched the storm through the window, but her ears stayed fixed on the vet's voice. "One cub. I feel one already moving," Dr. Renee said. "We'll try to save as many as we can." Suddenly, there was a crash from the back hallway. The vet assistant spun around. "What was that?" Dr. Renee's brow furrowed. "Check the kennels." That sounded like the back door. Amenda was already moving. She drew her flashlight and stepped into the hallway. The air felt colder back here, and not just from the storm. As she rounded the corner, she found the source. The back door had been forced open, from the outside. "Milo," she whispered, recognizing the dented metal and claw marks. "He's still around." Milo was a massive male bobcat that had been reported weeks earlier, aggressive, territorial, and injured. Locals said he'd attacked a hiker's dog and vanished into the woods. Some believed he'd been tracking a female. Amenda's heart pounded. Had the pregnant bobcat been running from him? She locked the back door, shoved a cabinet in front of it, and returned to the surgery room. Dr. Renee looked up with worry in her eyes. What was it? Another bobcat. Probably the father, Amenda said. But he's angry. Dangerous. Dr. Renee shook her head. Well, she's lucky she made it to you. Because she's not just in labor, she's fighting infection. If she had stayed in the woods, she wouldn't have survived the night. A long silence passed. Then, finally, a soft cry filled the room. Amenda looked up. A tiny, damp bobcat cub was being cleaned gently with a towel by the assistant. The mother bobcat's head moved slightly, her breath shallow but steady. She's holding on, Dr. Renee whispered. They worked through the night. 2 cubs were born alive. 1 didn't make it. But the mother? She did. Just after 5 a.m., Amenda sat in the quiet recovery room. The mother bobcat was resting now, her body curled protectively around her 2 cubs. Tubes still fed her fluids, but her breathing was calm. Peaceful. She's strong, the vet said softly. But that doesn't mean she can go back right away. She needs time. Amenda watched the cubs wiggle against their mother's side. So small. So new. So miraculous. But deep down, she knew this wasn't the end. That male bobcat, Milo, was still out there. And if he'd tracked her once, he could do it again. Dr. Renee placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. Go home. Get rest. We'll call you if anything changes. Amenda shook her head. I'm not leaving them. She knew it wasn't protocol. She wasn't supposed to be involved. But something inside her had changed. This wasn't just an animal rescue. It was something deeper. A connection that had started on that lonely road, when a mother in pain had looked into her eyes and said nothing, but asked everything. And Amenda had listened. But now, the forest wasn't finished with them yet. Because in the shadows, just beyond the edge of safety, something was still watching. The sun rose slowly over Ridgepine, spilling gold across the misty hills. Birds began to chirp in the trees. The storm had passed, but a different kind of tension still lingered. Inside the quiet recovery room at the animal clinic, Officer Amenda Clark sat beside the glass window, watching over the mother bobcat and her 2 newborn cubs. She hadn't slept. She couldn't. Something in her gut told her this wasn't over. The mother, still too weak to stand, curled tightly around her cubs. Her ears twitched at every noise. Her breathing remained shallow, but steady. Dr. Renee entered quietly. She made it through the night. That's rare. Most wild animals never survive this kind of labor in captivity. She's still fighting. Amenda nodded. She's not just fighting for herself. She's protecting them. The vet gave a soft smile. Funny how we call them wild, yet sometimes they have more courage than we do. Amenda didn't respond. Her mind was elsewhere, back in the forest, back at that broken fence, back at the moment those golden eyes had locked with hers. Then the phone rang. Dr. Renee picked it up. Her face went pale. What is it? Amenda asked. Local farmer, Renee whispered. He just saw a large bobcat moving through his property. Big. Aggressive. Snarling at his dogs. Amenda was already on her feet. It's him. Milo. Dr. Renee looked toward the recovery window. You think he's coming here? I don't think, Amenda said, pulling on her jacket. I know. By the time the sun had fully risen, Amenda had secured every door and window in the clinic. She moved patrol cars to block entrances. The vet assistants were told to stay inside and stay quiet. Still, unease grew in her chest like smoke. Why had Milo come back now? The mother bobcat had left the wild. She had made a choice, abandon the forest and trust a human to save her cubs. That went against every instinct a bobcat had. And Milo? Maybe that's what angered him most. Suddenly, a sharp scratching noise echoed from the side of the building. Amenda ran to the corner window. There, on the edge of the trees, a massive bobcat stood on the clinic lawn. Dark fur. Scarred snout. Shoulders rippling with tension. He was watching the building. Not moving. Not afraid. He knew she was inside. Amenda stepped back, heart thudding. She reached for her tranquilizer rifle, not her usual equipment, but one Dr. Renee had for emergencies. She loaded a dart and took a breath. Outside, Milo began to pace. Then, he let out a long, low growl. The mother bobcat stirred in the recovery room. Her ears twitched. Her body rose slightly despite the pain. She was alert now. Listening. Stay down, Amenda whispered through the glass. But the mother didn't listen. With a sudden groan, she stood. She stood. Her legs wobbled beneath her, but she placed herself in front of the two cubs and faced the window. Another growl from outside. Another step forward from Milo. Amenda moved toward the entrance. No closer, she muttered. The massive bobcat padded slowly toward the clinic doors. 10 feet away. Then 5. Amenda raised the rifle. But then, something unexpected happened. Milo stopped. His ears perked. He let out a soft snarl, but not one of rage. It was low. Slow. Curious. He stared at the glass, and for a moment, so did the mother bobcat. There was silence. No rage. No blood. Just a moment between two animals who had once known each other. Maybe mates. Maybe rivals. Maybe both. And then, as the sun brightened the trees behind him, Milo turned. And disappeared into the forest. Amenda didn't move for a full minute. The danger was gone, but her heart still raced. 3 days later, the bobcat was cleared to be moved to a wildlife sanctuary just outside the county. She and her cubs would live in a protected environment, no hunters, no threats, just time to heal. Amenda helped load them into the special transport crate. The mother didn't growl. She didn't fight. She simply looked at Amenda one last time, those golden eyes soft, tired, but full of something else. Gratitude. Then the truck rolled away. Weeks passed. Spring turned into summer. Amenda found herself patrolling the same road again, past the broken fence, past the tall pines, past the gravel where she first saw those glowing eyes. She stopped her cruiser and stepped out. The air was still. Warm. Peaceful. She walked over to the spot by the fence, where mud had once been streaked with blood and paw prints. Now it was covered in wildflowers. She knelt down and smiled. Sometimes, help doesn't come from the loudest cry. Sometimes, it comes from silence. From eyes that plead, even if they can't speak. From a wild mother who dared to crawl toward the one human who wouldn't run away. And from a police officer who chose to listen, not with duty, but with heart. Amenda turned to leave. But just before she opened her car door, she froze. Far off, deep in the woods, hidden in the morning mist. A flicker of movement. A flash of golden fur. And two tiny cubs bouncing behind her. Amenda smiled, eyes misting over. They were free now. And they were watching. Just like their mother once had.